Good morning and welcome to another video with a guy and his projects. Today we are working on my wife's minivan. This is a 2006 Town & Country Touring Edition. We're replacing the lower control arm, which has the new ball joint. So on this setup, on this stock van, the lower control arm ball joint is non-serviceable. You can replace the rubber boot, but you can't replace the ball joint. The only way to replace the ball joint is to replace the whole entire control arm, which is right here, which is just fine because on this van, it came from Minnesota. We bought it off some snowbirds. I'm in Arizona. It's completely rusted out, and the bushings on the driver's side, I did the driver's side last night after work, were completely toast, as in disintegrated, as in no longer a part of the control arm. So replacing the whole entire control arm is not a bad thing. Then you get your new ball joint on it, you get your front bushing, your rear bushing, and all that good stuff. So we're replacing that. We also have the tie rod ends are also worn out. The inners, I just checked the driver's side last night, are fine. We're not going to replace them. It's pretty simple. If you want to know how to, it's the exact same process on my Sentra, which I also have a video on. Go check that video out. I replaced the inner tie rods and the bellows, or the boots. So same exact process. Go check that video out if you're wanting to know how to do it on this van. But this is the outer tie rod. We're going to replace that. And then we are going to replace the sway bar bushings. Not necessarily because they're bad bushings. The sway bar end links, or stabilizer bar end links, we're not replacing them because they're bad. We're replacing them because it's going to be right there. I'm already in there. I'm already taking care of it. I might as well just replace it. These were like 15 bucks or something like that. Just do it. We are also replacing the coilovers, the quick strut, the shock and spring assembly, whatever you want to call it. I'm replacing those. I did a separate video on that on the driver's side last night. Go check that video out, where I replaced that whole quick strut assembly. I'm going to keep it separate because this is going to be a somewhat longer video, because all my videos are long because I talk too much. But if you want to see how to replace your strut assembly, go ahead and check out that video. So if you're watching this and you have already ran into the problem on the driver's side where you can't get that bolt out because of the transmission, there's an easy fix. The service manual is going to tell you to drop the whole entire subframe, or the cradle for the subframe. It's not necessary. All you got to do is jack up the transmission a little bit. It's not hard, it's not bad, it's not going to destroy your transmission. Boop! Probably take that out because I offer no guarantees in my videos. I'm not a mechanic. I'm not certified to be a mechanic. I'm not certified in any way to work on my vehicles. I'm just a DIYer that tries to save some money, and I like to know my vehicles. So it did not hurt my transmission, I should say that. It did not hurt my pan. It's okay. I'll show you how I did it, and you'll see that it did not destroy my stuff. No guarantees on yours. So let's get to it. Starting at your tie rod, you're going to bust off the holder nut. Can be kind of difficult. Just do it. You don't need to completely loosen the nut, just pull it off. After you got that loose, I'm going to go down here to the lower ball joint. Pretty much the only way to get this is with a box end wrench, unless you take the CV off, which ain't worth it. Once you get the nut most of the way off the bolt, use a pickle fork or whatever tool you got to separate the control arm from that knuckle. Once you get that separated, pound your pickle fork back in to hold the bolt down. This is the only way I found to get the nut off. There wasn't enough clearance with the bolt sticking all the way up. But once you have it spaced out, you should be good to go, theoretically. Alright, back to the tie rod. You can go ahead and undo the bolt, and using your same pickle fork or whatever tool of choice you have, go ahead and bust that tie rod off as well. Boom. Gotta love slow-mo. Sometimes it's kind of fun. Alright, so here, sorry about the camera angle, you'll see in the bottom left corner of your screen, that's the bolt we're loosening. This was super, super tight. I'm using a 2-foot breaker bar right there to bust it loose. And yeah, it was pretty tight. So it's also got a lot of threads on it. Once you break it loose, you're going to have to get a crescent wrench of sorts to hold the backer nut on this one as well. Just get it in there. You can probably support it on that sway bar arm and then continue on with the loosening, which, as mentioned, it was pretty rusted together. But once you get it all the way out, you can pull that nut off, and the nut, because there's pressure on it, the bolt, you're going to have to use your ratchet or a gun of sorts to go ahead and pull the bolt the rest of the way out. Back to your tie rod, I just like to keep it interesting and bouncing you guys around. I like to put some tape on the holder nut. This keeps you from having to necessarily count your turns on the tie rod as you pull it off to keep your alignment. If you're not using tape, make sure you count these revolutions, because you're going to have to put it back on in the same revolutions, or your alignment guy is going to have a blast. By taping my backing nut there, it just eliminates that. So down here on the cradle, you're going to need a 21 millimeter bolt, and there's a nut on top of that, as well as a 15 millimeter bolt on the back side of it. And this is right in front of your body mount. I didn't get that on camera, sorry, but once you pull those off, you can then pry this arm out. This was difficult. Your manual wants you to pull the cradle off, but mine was so rusted out that I was afraid if I got it off, it would never go back on. This would be much easier if you did take that cradle apart. I just pulled those bolts out and manhandled it. That's my bushing. Can you tell it was bad? It was a bit bad. In fact, it kind of separated completely. The other half of the bushing is still in the hole, which we're going to pull out right now with some needle nose pliers. There's the rest of the bushing. Yeah, that's pretty horrible. It's actually very horrible. Entertaining, but horrible. And that's why we're changing it. This van was a bit neglected. Alright, so your new one, you're going to go ahead and put some grease. It doesn't say so in the instructions, but I'm doing it anyway. Lube is pretty much always a good thing in my book. So lube it up. And then I decided before I put that in, I was going to remove the sway bar end links. For me, I had to cut them off. They were so rusted out, I could not get the bolt off. So I cut them off. It was faster, easier, less stress. And now we can go ahead and put your new control arm in. I will say this looks like it takes just a few moments on video. This was the hardest part of the whole job, was getting this back in without removing the cradle. You can't really tell, but I'm using a 6-inch C-clamp to help force that bushing in place. And it worked just fine. It did take a minute though. So once you get your control arm in, you can put your bolt back in through that front bushing. And this is where on the driver's side you pick up that transmission by the oil pan or transmission pan. Not a bad thing. I have not had a bad experience doing that. No guarantees on yours. On this side you do not have to lift the transmission though. And you just saw me put some copper anti-seize back on. I don't think I need it because it's not really going to rust much more. I'm in Arizona, but it made me feel better anyhow. So go ahead and torque that bolt back down to about, about there. Grab some anti-seize. I put it on all this stuff as well. These are your rear cradle bolts where your arm bushing goes. And just slap her back together. Like I said, service manual has you taking off that entire cradle, which I would have done if my bolts and nuts weren't all completely rusted out. Sometimes life just don't go your way. Get that beautiful copper anti-seize. Whether it works or not, I don't know. I don't really use it very often, but here and there. Alright, this is your new sway bar end link. There is a right and wrong way if you have grease fittings. Look at your instructions. It'll tell you for this vehicle and this sway bar link. It wanted that upper grease joint to be going towards the front bumper, which puts the lower grease joint going towards the rear of the van. And you're just going to wiggle it in there. Get it in the mount. Again, I'm using anti-seize just for peace of mind because this van is, or was, really rusted. I've replaced a lot of stuff on this van now, and it's actually doing pretty good. And you're just going to tighten those up. Use a wrench on the back side if your new sway bar link allows. Moog, Mog, whatever they're called, does pretty good about supplying the right equipment to do the job. And again, just tighten it down to about, I don't know, right about there. Look in your service manual for proper torque specs. Now we're going to put our brake line back together onto our strut. Again, we replaced the struts in another video. Check that out if you're interested. So tighten your brake line down, just like yay. Now you're going to get your supplies from your lower ball joint. You're going to wiggle this in. Again, on video I make it look pretty easy, but I had to play with this for a few minutes before it went in, and pretty much that wiggle motion right there is what worked. Upwards pressure on the control arm and wiggling the hub assembly knuckle. Same thing, you can't push that ball joint all the way up and get the nut on. You gotta put the ball joint threads just barely through, get the nut on, and then start tightening it down. Unless, of course, you take that CV axle out. And this part kind of took a minute because there's not really any room for you to move a wrench around, so slow going, but get that castle nut on until it is tight, and then find the hole in the bolt. Stick your cotter pin through and bend the ends back. Don't forget your grease zerk fitting if you were supplied with one. If you have a sealed ball joint, you won't need this. We are using a greasable one though. Typically they're about a 7mm wrench to fit, but that's not always the case. And now your tie rod, and again count the same turns you took it off with, put it on, or if you taped your backer nut together, just screw it all the way into your backer nut, which for us is going to be right about there. Move your hub assembly, stick that bad boy in, get your castle nut. Helps if you have it out of the package. And again, you're going to tighten this down pretty dang tight, follow your torque specs in your manual, and then you're going to go a little bit more till the hole is clear in the stud and stick your cotter pin through. Don't forget to bend it around so your cotter pin doesn't wiggle back out, of course, because that would be a less than pleasant day. There's no pressure on the cotter pin, it's literally just there to keep that castle nut from vibrating loose. And again, take your supplied zerk fitting for the grease if you were supplied with one. If you have a sealed joint, again, you won't need this. It's very easy to cross thread those, so be careful, be patient, take your time. Booyah, just like that. Don't over torque these, they're barely held in. Don't forget to take your tape off of your backer nut on that tie rod, and then of course you're going to tighten it back up. And here I notice my inner tie rod actually seems to be pretty loose. I need to take care of that before it becomes an issue. I'm greasing on the driver's side because I didn't get the footage on the passenger side, of course. Just go hit all your grease zerks, fill all your boots up with grease until they start to leak out. That's how you know they're full. And for us, we have one on each end of the sway bar link, one on the tie rod link, end link, and one on the control arm ball joint. Easy peasy. Don't forget to torque down your lug nuts to your service manual specifications, guys. Alright guys, believe it or not, and I say that more for me than you because you have no perception of time on this video editing process, but it's been 7 months since we've installed the tie rods, the ball joints, the control arms, all that stuff that we just did in the video. 7 months it took me to edit this footage. Why? I have no idea. I mean, shoot, right now we're in middle of September. And when we did this job, that was pre-COVID bullcrap. That was back when I still had the Excursion. So I don't know why it took me so long to get to this. It's been sitting on my desktop as a folder of unedited footage for a long time. I have no idea why, but I finally did it. And this actually works out good for you because now I can tell you how the parts are working out. And I'm actually trying to do that a little bit more, not wait 7 months, but wait, you know, a month or so before I edit or before I post and do my outtake. That way I can give you guys an idea of how the parts are working and a little review on them. So keep in mind on all this, I'm not a mechanic or professionally experienced in any way. I'm just a dude that likes to work on his vehicles, save a buck or two from the mechanic. Nothing against mechanics whatsoever. My truck, the F-250, is actually at the mechanic shop right now. I did the tie rods and it's getting in alignment. So, anywho, this job, can you do it in your driveway or under a shade tree? I believe you can. I didn't take that many tools. If you drop the subframe or the cradle underneath the all that stuff, that will be way easier to get the control arms in and out. I did not do that because it is so rusted up in there. All the bolts, the nuts on top of the cradle were rusted, seized, and nasty, and I cheated essentially to do it the way I did it, but it worked. Which means it can work for you too. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but it can work for you. So everything's holding up great. The tie rods are holding up great. The control arms, I've got no squeaks, I've got no clunks, I've got nothing that shouldn't be there other than what's there from other parts being rusted out. So would I recommend the parts I put in? As of now, I want to say yes. Keep in mind that's just based off of a regular dude. I'm not qualified in any way to do that. I'm not sponsored. I'm not in any way. I'm just a dude, bought stuff with his own money, installed it with his own effort, and yeah. The only thing I will say that you need to do, highly recommend you do, is an alignment. Do not get an alignment after this job. Like I just said, my F-250 is at the shop right now because I did the tie rods yesterday, and it's at the shop getting an alignment now. It is worth the alignment. Even if it visually looks great, fantastic, it's still worth getting the alignment. So yeah, if you liked what you saw, leave me a thumbs up. If you want to see more, smash that subscribe button. Hit the bell notification thingy so you know when I post. I've got a whole playlist dedicated to this van and a couple other vans as well. Check them out. And we'll see you next time.